She was nobody. Not invisible. Nobody. There is a difference. Invisible means someone chose not to see you. Nobody means you were never in the equation at all. Nobody means you show up before the sun, you clean what other people dirty, you disappear before the people who matter arrive, and you do all of this so completely and so consistently that the building itself forgets you exist. Grace Nwosu had been nobody in that building for 11 months. She was very good at it. Until the morning 3 men in expensive suits decided that nobody meant fair game. Until the morning one of them grabbed her arm in a marble lobby that cost more than her entire village back in Enugu, and told her to get down and clean a spot that did not exist. Until the morning the most feared man in Seoul looked up from the other side of that lobby, looked at the 3 men, looked at her arm, looked at the specific quality of her dignity being tested, and said 4 words in a voice so quiet and so absolute that the entire room stopped breathing. She is not your concern. Nobody moved. The man released her arm like it had burned him. And Grace Nwosu, who had spent 11 months being nobody, suddenly understood 2 things simultaneously. The first was that she had been seen the entire time. The second was that being seen by this particular man was either the best thing that had ever happened to her, or the beginning of something she was not remotely prepared for. She was right about both. Stay with me. This story is going to take you somewhere you are completely unprepared for. And it starts right now. If this story already has you, subscribe right now and turn on that bell. This channel is where love is dangerous, dignity is everything, and the most powerful men in the room always fall hardest for the woman they were never supposed to notice. You do not want to miss where this goes. Now let's go back to where it all started. Her mother had named her Grace because she believed her daughter would be a princess. Grace thought about this every morning at 4:15 a.m. when her alarm pulled her out of whatever small mercy sleep had offered and dropped her back into the cold specific reality of a single room in Itaewon that smelled permanently of instant noodles, and the particular exhaustion of people living too close to the edge of what they could manage. She would lie in the dark for 30 seconds. Exactly 30. She had counted. This was her one daily luxury. 30 seconds of horizontal stillness before the day demanded everything she had. She used them the same way every morning. She thought about her mother in Enugu, about the name that meant daughter of a king, about the distance between what she had been named and what she had become. Then she would get up. Because princesses did not send money home. Workers did. Remember that. Because everything about who Grace is, every decision she makes in this story, lives inside that sentence. Princesses did not send money home. Workers did. She had arrived in Seoul 18 months ago on a student visa attached to a language program she had attended faithfully for 6 months before the money ran out, and the choices narrowed to the specific ugliness they narrowed to when you were a young Nigerian woman alone in a foreign city with no safety net and too much pride to call home and admit defeat. Cleaning was honest work. She had decided that on the first day and she had never moved from that position. Cleaning was honest and it was invisible and it paid enough, barely, always barely, to cover the room and the food and the monthly transfer that landed in her mother's account in Enugu like a small proof that leaving had been worth it. And Chukwuemeka's school fees. Her younger brother with the serious face and the laugh that came out of nowhere, and the absolute certainty that his big sister in Korea would make sure he stayed in school. That certainty was the most expensive thing Grace owned. She worked 3 buildings. The apartment complex in Mapo, the office building in Uido, and the tower in Gangnam, the tall glass one on the corner that caught the morning light and threw it back at the city like a challenge, like a building that had decided it was better than everything around it and wanted everyone to know. She had known from her first morning that the Gangnam Tower was different. Not the marble floors that reflected the ceiling lights so perfectly they looked like a second sky. Not the artwork, abstract pieces in dark frames that she had looked up once out of curiosity, and then immediately looked away from when she saw the prices. Not the security that was heavier and more serious than any office building she had ever cleaned had any legitimate reason to require. What made the Gangnam Tower different was the silence. Not absence of sound. A specific quality of silence. The kind that lived in spaces where people understood that careless words had weight. The kind that said if you knew how to listen, that the men who worked in this building had something to protect and were very serious about protecting it. Grace cleaned the floors and did not think about what she was cleaning around. This was her most important rule. More important than keep your head down. More important than do not make eye contact. More important than finish before anyone arrives. Do not think about what you are cleaning around. She had grown up in Enugu. Her father had driven for a man whose name people spoke quietly. She knew what serious silence smelled like. She knew what it meant when the guards at a building moved the way these guards moved. Not bored, not routine, always just slightly alert, always just slightly ready. She knew. She cleaned. She did not think about it. His name was Han Soo-Hyun. She did not know this for the first 4 months. She knew him only as the man on the 42nd floor. The one whose office she was never permitted to enter, whose corridor she vacuumed but whose door remained a boundary she understood without being told. In 4 months she had seen him exactly twice. The first time he had stepped out of the elevator while she was mopping the lobby floor at 6:40 a.m. and walked past her without registering her existence. She had pressed herself against the wall from habit. He had not looked at her. He was on his phone, speaking in Korean in a voice so quiet and so controlled it was almost not a sound at all. More like the suggestion of authority, like a frequency only certain people were calibrated to receive. She had watched him cross the lobby and disappear through a door she had not previously known existed. Then she had gone back to mopping. Pay attention to that door. I am telling you right now, pay attention to that door. The second time was different. She had been on her knees cleaning the base of the reception desk, a task she had made peace with because the base of reception desks collected what she thought of as honest dirt, the kind left by actual occupancy rather than performative cleanliness. When she felt the quality of the air in the lobby change. She had learned to read air the way other people read faces. Pressure. Attention. The specific weight of being observed. She turned her head. He was standing 2 meters away looking directly at her. She had expected, in the half-second before she processed what she was seeing, the usual categories. The assessment. The dismissal. The particular way certain men looked at women in service uniforms that was not really looking at all but rather a confirmation that the category was correct and the individual was irrelevant. That was not what she saw. What she saw was focused, dispassionate, entirely unreadable attention. The look of someone receiving information and filing it with precision. Not unkind. Not kind. Simply present. Completely, uncomfortably present. She held his gaze for exactly 1 second. Then she looked back at the floor. When she looked up again he was gone. She finished the base of the reception desk and did not think about the way he had looked at her. She thought about it for 3 days. The morning everything changed was a Thursday in March. Outside the building Seoul smelled the way it smelled in early spring. Cold still but with something underneath it that was thinking about warmth. The city exhaling the last of winter with the specific relief of something that had been held too long. The cherry trees along the street outside were 2 weeks from blooming. Grace noticed them every morning on the walk from the bus stop and thought about her mother's mango tree in Enugu, which bloomed in a completely different season in a completely different world that she carried with her everywhere she went like a second skin. She arrived at 4:58. Collected her cart from the service entrance. Started with the lobby. She loved the lobby at 5 a.m. She would not have used that word love out loud to anyone. Because loving a marble floor in a building she cleaned for money felt like a concession to something she was not ready to concede. But there was something about the lobby before the world arrived in it. The way the overhead lights came up slowly and the marble floor revealed itself in sections. The way sound behaved differently in an empty space. The way she moved through it with complete authority because at 5 a.m. it was hers in a way it would belong to no one else the rest of the day. She was on her second pass of the glass panels at 7:40 when the front doors opened. 3 men. She registered them peripherally and kept her eyes on the glass. Korean. 40s. Suits that cost real money and fit with the particular carelessness of men, who had never once worried about a dry cleaning bill. The one in front had the specific energy of someone who expected rooms to reorganize themselves around his arrival. She turned back to the glass. She could see them reflected in it. They went to the reception desk. Yuna, who had progressed over 11 months from ignoring Grace entirely to occasional nodding, which Grace considered a significant diplomatic achievement, spoke to them in Korean. Then the man in front laughed. It was that laugh. The one that was not about anything funny. Grace kept her cloth moving on the glass. Remember what I told you at the beginning. She was nobody. Not invisible. Nobody. And this man, this laughing man in his expensive suit, was about to discover that nobody and untouchable were not the same thing. Hey, She did not turn around. Hey, cleaning lady. The deliberate erasure of her name was so practiced it was almost elegant. She turned around. The man pointed at the marble floor near the entrance. A small coffee stain. Fresh, the rings were still wet at the edges. A stain that had not been there when she had cleaned the lobby 40 minutes ago. Come clean this. She crossed the lobby and cleaned it. The entire interaction was 2 minutes of her life. She had had 200 versions of it across her career. She cleaned it and turned back to her cart, and that would have been the end of it, and she would have finished the glass and gone home and called Chukwamika on her lunch break, and none of what came after would have happened. His hand closed around her upper arm. She went very still. Not from fear. Something colder than fear. The specific stillness of a woman who has made an immediate and complete assessment of a situation, and is deciding with absolute precision what to do next. She looked at the hand, then up at his face. His expression was the expression of a test being administered. The specific cruelty of someone checking how far something could go before anything stopped it. Let go of my arm, she said. Quietly. In English. With the specific quality of a woman who had not asked this nicely, and was not going to ask it twice. He looked at his companions. They smirked. She speaks, he said in Korean for their benefit. Then back to her in English, cute. His grip tightened. You missed a spot. He pointed at the floor near his feet. There was no spot. The floor was immaculate. She had made it immaculate. Get down and clean it. The lobby had gone still in the way of spaces where something wrong was being permitted. Grace was calculating. She was calculating distance to the service exit. She was calculating the cost of this job against the cost of what was being asked of her. She was calculating Chukwamika's school fees and her mother's blood pressure medication, and the rent that was due on Friday, and the specific impossible arithmetic of a young Nigerian woman alone in a foreign country who could not afford to lose what she had but could also not afford to lose what she was. She was still calculating when a voice came from across the lobby. Quiet. Completely calm. The kind of voice that did not need volume because it carried something else entirely. The absolute settled certainty of a man who had never in his life issued an empty word. For words. She is not your concern. The room stopped. She felt it before she processed it. The quality of the air changed completely in the space of a single sentence. Like a frequency shift. Like the whole lobby had been recalibrated by 4 words delivered in a voice that cost nothing to produce and everything to receive. Han Soo-Hyun stood at the elevator bank. He had not been there 30 seconds ago. He was there now. Dark coat over a darker suit. Phone in one hand. Completely still in the way that she would spend weeks trying to understand. Not the stillness of someone choosing not to move, but the stillness of someone for whom motion was always a considered decision. His attention was directed entirely at the man holding her arm. No anger. That was what stopped the room. Not anger. Not threat. Not the performed menace of a powerful man asserting dominance. Just fact. The absolute settled fact of a man telling a room how things were. The hand released her arm. Not gradually. The way you release something that had become dangerous. His 2 companions had already stepped back. She had not seen them move. They were simply further away. Mr. Han. The man's voice had lost every trace of its earlier confidence. It was the voice of someone who had just understood something about the room they were in that they had not understood before. We had a meeting scheduled. It has been rescheduled. Han Soo-Hyun looked at his phone once. Then back up. The look lasted exactly 1 second. You should leave now. No emphasis. No raised volume. No visible shift in his expression. The 3 men left. The lobby was completely silent. Yuna behind the reception desk was looking at her computer screen with the focused intensity of someone who had decided they had seen nothing. Grace stood with her cleaning cloth in both hands and her heart doing something complicated in her chest, and looked at the middle distance because she did not yet know what to do with any of this. She heard footsteps. Han Soo-Hyun crossed the lobby and stopped in front of her. Up close he was. She noted this against her will with the precise involuntary attention her brain applied to things it considered significant, extraordinarily still, and tall. And the specific close proximity revealed things that distance had concealed. That he was younger than she had thought, that his eyes were the particular dark that absorbed light rather than reflecting it, and that he smelled of cedar and something cold and expensive that she could not name and would spend an embarrassing amount of time later trying to identify. He looked at her arm. The place where the man's hand had been. "Are you hurt?" he said. Not "Are you all right?" Not "I'm sorry." Not the social formula. "Are you hurt?" Like the only information he required was physical. Like everything else, the humiliation, the violation, the specific exhaustion of being grabbed in a building she had cleaned for 11 months, was understood and did not require articulation. "No," she said. He looked at her face. The assessment again. That precise, unhurried cataloging. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator. "Thank you," she said. He stopped. Did not turn around. The lobby held its breath. A pause of exactly 2 seconds. Then he stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. Grace stood in the lobby for a long moment. Her arm tingled where the man had gripped it. Her chest felt strange in a way she was not going to examine. She went back to the glass. She finished it. She took her cart to the service entrance and walked out into the Seoul morning that was cold and bright and completely indifferent to the fact that something had just shifted in the architecture of her life. She did not know it yet. She would know it soon. She did not sleep well that Thursday night. She lay in the narrow bed in her Itaewon room and listened to the building settle around her, and stared at the ceiling and replayed the lobby with the obsessive precision her brain reserved for things that had not finished yet. She did not replay it because of the man who had grabbed her. She had a system for carrying those encounters. A specific interior process she had developed over years that involved acknowledging what had happened, refusing to minimize it, and then placing it in a compartment where it could not contaminate the rest of her. The system worked. She trusted it. She replayed it because of Han Soo-Hyun. Because of 4 words and the way a room full of people had stopped like someone had pressed pause on the universe. Because of "Are you hurt?" instead of "Are you all right?" Because of the cedar and the cold and the smell she could not name. Because of the 2 seconds before he stepped into the elevator. 2 seconds of a man who did not pause standing still. What had those 2 seconds been? "She is not your concern" did not mean "she is my concern." She told herself this clearly and without sentiment. She said it out loud in the dark of her Itaewon room. It did not mean he was concerned with her. It meant she was inside his building and what happened inside his building was his business. That was all. She believed this completely for approximately 3 days. 3 days. I want you to hold on to that number. Because in 3 days everything she had just told herself was going to start coming apart. Not dramatically. The way things that are actually true come apart, slowly, undeniably, and one specific detail at a time. On Sunday she received a message from the building management company. "Your assigned hours for the Gangnam Tower location have been adjusted. Effective Monday, your shift will run from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. An additional 30 minutes of compensation has been added to your weekly rate. No explanation required. Please confirm receipt." She read it 3 times. The 6 to 9 shift was the shift that overlapped with the building's active hours. It was the shift that meant she would no longer be gone before anyone arrived. It was the shift that meant she would be present, visible, moving through the floors, cart and uniform and mop, during the first hour of the ordinary working day. She confirmed receipt. She did not ask why. She already knew why. Or rather, she knew there was a why. She did not yet know its shape. She would find out on Monday morning at 8:47 when 2 men she had not seen before stepped off the elevator on the 2nd floor, and one of them looked at her and said in Korean, Were you on this floor this morning?" And she answered him. And what she told him, what she had seen at 6:20 that morning coming out of the stairwell, wrong shoes for the building, wrong energy, wrong direction, was apparently exactly what they needed. The man looked at his colleague, then back at her. "You understand Korean?" "A little," she said carefully. He nodded slowly. "You're certain about what you saw?" "Yes." He was already on his phone. Grace pushed her cart to the next room and kept cleaning. She kept the thing she was beginning to understand very carefully at the back of her mind where it could not interfere with the mop. Han Soo-Hyun appeared at 9:03. Not Ms. Cho. Not a message. Him. She was on the 3rd floor by then, working through the offices with the systematic efficiency she had developed over 11 months. She heard the elevator open. She heard the footsteps that were already becoming recognizable to her. A rhythm and a weight she had registered without meaning to. She heard them stop outside the office she was in. She kept cleaning. Miss Nwosu. She went still. He knew her name. Of course he knew her name. She understood in that moment, with the particular clarity of something that had been true for a while being finally acknowledged, that Han Soo-Hyun knew a great deal more about her than she had assumed. That the adjusted hours and the careful positioning and the 2-second pause in the lobby were not separate incidents. That she had been observed before she had begun observing anything. The question was why. She turned around. He was in the corridor, one hand against the door frame, jacket on, morning sharp. Looking at her with the focused attention she was learning to read as his default mode with things he considered worth paying attention to. The information you gave my team this morning, he said. It was useful. I just told them what I saw. Yes, he said. That is what was useful. A pause. You have been working in this building for 11 months. Yes. You clean the second and third floors. And the lobby. And the basement corridor. Something shifted in his expression. The recalibration she would come to know well, the minor adjustment of someone whose model of a situation has just been updated. You notice things. I notice what's there, she said. Most people walk past what's there. He looked at her for a moment longer than was strictly required. My assistant will contact you this week, he said. I have a different arrangement to discuss. He left. Grace stood in the office and looked at her mop for a long moment. Then she made a decision. She finished the floor. Whatever was coming, she would meet it clean. The different arrangement was considerably more different than she had anticipated. Ms. Cho, Han Soo-Hyun's assistant, a precise Korean woman in her 30s who communicated with the specific warmth of someone who had learned professionalism as a survival strategy and found it suited her, met her on Wednesday in a cafe near the building. Small. Quiet. The kind of place that did not encourage lingering. She placed a contract on the table between them. Grace read it carefully. Then read it again. Then looked up. This is not a cleaning contract, she said. No, Ms. Cho agreed. He wants me to observe. Report. Accurately and discreetly, Ms. Cho said. You would continue cleaning. Your role would appear unchanged. The observation would be secondary. Grace looked at the number on the contract. She looked at it for a long time. I am going to let you calculate what that number meant for a moment. Think about everything she was carrying. Chukwamika's school fees. Her mother's medication. The room that smelled like instant noodles. The arithmetic that never quite balanced no matter how carefully she managed it. Now imagine a number that made all of that suddenly, startlingly solvable. That is what was sitting on the table in front of her. That is the weight of the decision she was being asked to make. What exactly would I be observing, she said. People, Ms. Cho said simply. Who enters? Who exits? Who is where they should not be? Who behaves in ways that don't match their stated purpose? Grace held the contract. And if I say no, she said. Your current arrangement continues unchanged, Ms. Cho said. She believed her. Which was, she thought, the most sophisticated element of the offer. No pressure. No consequence. Just a door held open. She asked her questions. 6 of them. Specific, practical, unglamorous questions about safety and documentation and what happened if she observed something that put her directly in the path of whatever this building was actually involved in. Ms. Cho answered each one without hesitation and without embellishment. Grace signed the contract. The careful positioning of her route to create maximum coverage. She had filed that under operational strategy. The fact that she had seen him in the weeks since the lobby, approximately 3 times a week in corridors and elevators and once standing at the window of his office when she passed the open door, and that each time he acknowledged her, not with conversation, not with anything that could be called social interaction, but with the specific quality of noticing that said I see you and I mean it, she had filed that under professional awareness. She was filing a great deal under professional awareness. She was aware this was not sustainable. The coffee arrived on a Wednesday. She was in the small office Ms. Cho had arranged for her. Not a cleaning supply room, an actual office, small but private, with a window that looked at the building next door and a desk where she could spread her notes, reviewing entry logs from the previous 72 hours when she became aware that she was not alone. She looked up. Han Soo-Hyun was in the doorway. He had 2 coffees. He placed one on her desk. Black with 1 sugar. Then he sat down across from her with his own coffee and opened his laptop and began working, and the entire interaction, the arrival, the coffee, the sitting down, was so completely unremarkable in its execution that for a full minute she simply sat with the coffee and could not find a single professional framework in which to file it. She looked at the coffee. She looked at him. He was reading something on his screen with the focused attention he brought to everything. Dark hair slightly loose from whatever precision it had been in that morning. Collar open. The morning version of him rather than the public version. Like the office was a room where he had decided a different set of rules applied. You know I take it black, she said finally. He looked up from his laptop. You take it black in the morning, he said. In the afternoon you take it with 1 sugar. She stared at him. He went back to his screen. She picked up the coffee. It was exactly right. She drank it and said nothing and kept working and felt something in her chest that she was not going to name in this office in this building in this city that was not her city. She thought about it for the rest of the day. She thought about it for 3 days after that. She thought about it, if she was being completely honest with herself, for considerably longer than 3 days. I need you to understand something about Han Soo-Hyun before we go further. Because I think right now you are seeing what Grace is seeing. A powerful, controlled, devastatingly perceptive man doing small quiet things that cost him nothing to perform. And I need you to understand that for this specific man, none of those things were small. For a man who had spent 20 years building a world in which every action was strategic and every gesture was calculated. The coffee was not small. The 2 seconds in the lobby were not small. Nothing he did with intention was small. Grace knew this. She was just not ready to say it out loud yet. Neither was he. Keep watching. 3 weeks after the coffee, he brought takeout. She had been working until 9 p.m. on a surveillance analysis that needed to be finished before morning. Cross-referencing movement patterns across 6 weeks of entry logs to identify a recurring sequence she had noticed on Tuesdays that did not correspond to any authorized personnel schedule. She was deep in it. The kind of deep where the world outside the numbers ceased to exist. She had been in this state since 7 p.m. and had not noticed that the building had emptied around her the way buildings did in the evening, slowly floor by floor, until the silence had a different quality. A nighttime quality. The quality of a building that had finished being what it was in the daytime, and was resting before it had to be it again. She smelled it before she heard him. Something warm. Something that hit her directly in a part of her brain she had not expected to be accessible in this building on this floor at 9 p.m. Palm oil. Plantain. The specific warm smoky sweetness of Nigerian food made properly. Not approximated, not adapted, actually properly. And the wave of involuntary emotion that came with it was so immediate and so complete that she had to put her pen down and press the back of her hand to her mouth for a moment. She heard the door. Han Soo-Hyun came in carrying 2 takeout containers. He set them on the desk without ceremony. You haven't eaten, he said. How do you know that? You have been in this office since 7 a.m. You did not leave for lunch. It is 9 p.m. You track my movements. I track everyone's movements in the building. He sat down across from her. His own container was Korean food. She noted this, filed it, knew she would return to it. It is not specific to you. She looked at the container in front of her. She looked at him. This is from the restaurant on the corner in Itaewon, she said slowly. The Nigerian place. Yes, I mentioned that restaurant once. 3 weeks ago. In passing. You said the jollof rice was the closest to your mother's you had found in Seoul. She looked at him. She looked at him for a long time. He was opening his own container with the focused efficiency he applied to everything, apparently entirely unbothered by what he had just revealed, that he had not only heard a passing comment she had made 3 weeks ago but had held it, retained it, and acted on it in a way that was so specific and so accurate that it could not be called anything other than deliberate. Han Soo-Hyun, she said. He looked up. She did not finish the sentence. There were approximately 7 things she could have said. She chose none of them because none of them were ready to be said in this office with this man with the smell of her mother's food filling a room in Seoul at 9 p.m. She opened her container. The jollof rice was exactly right. The smoky bottom the way her mother made it. The plantain soft and sweet at the edges the way Chukwamika always stole from the pan before it was properly done. She pressed her lips together. Breathed. Picked up her fork. They ate in silence for 40 minutes while she finished her analysis. He read whatever he was reading. At 10 o'clock he closed his laptop and stood. The pattern you found on Tuesdays, he said. She looked up. You were right to flag it, he said. We will discuss it tomorrow. He left. She sat in the office after the door closed and the sound of his footsteps faded down the corridor, and she looked at the empty container in front of her, and the analysis on her desk and the Seoul night pressing against the window, and thought about a name that meant princess and what it meant that a man who could have anything had remembered exactly how she ate her rice. She was in trouble. She knew she was in trouble. She made a very firm and very professional decision to feel absolutely nothing about it. She was going to feel absolutely everything about it. You know that. I know that. She knew that if she was honest. But give her this moment. Give her this one moment of deciding she could manage it. Because what is coming next is going to take every resource she has. The trouble arrived 4 weeks later wearing the face of a woman named Park Ji-yeon. She arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in a car Grace recognized from the building's vehicle registry, registered to Director Choi on the 39th floor, which told her something immediately, because Director Choi's relationship with Han Soo-Hyun was one of the more complicated dynamics in the building, and Ji-yeon arriving in his car told her something about whose orbit Ji-yeon was in. Grace watched her cross the lobby from her position near the reception desk. Ji-yeon was beautiful in the specific way of someone for whom beauty was a project, maintained, calibrated, deployed. She wore it with the confidence of someone who understood its utility. She moved through the lobby like someone who had been in powerful buildings before, and was not impressed by this one specifically. She went to the 39th floor. On her way out 2 hours later she stopped in the lobby. She looked at Grace. The look was the one that Grace recognized from a lifetime of being in rooms where certain women decided immediately whether she was competition or furniture. Ji-yeon had apparently decided. "You're the cleaner," she said. In English. The deliberateness of the language was its own message. "Yes," Grace said. Ji-yeon's eyes moved over her with the slow assessment of someone taking inventory. Then she smiled, the smile that was architecture rather than feeling, and walked out of the building. Grace stood in the lobby with her cloth. She noted the look. She noted the language. She noted the specific quality of the inventory. She filed it all under things to watch. 2 days later an anonymous complaint was filed with the building management company. Cleaning staff observed in areas beyond authorized zones. Behavior inconsistent with stated role. Recommend immediate review. Grace received the message on her personal phone. She read it twice. Then she photographed it and sent it to Ms. Cho. Ms. Cho's response came in 40 minutes. "Leave it with me." The following morning the complaint had been withdrawn. Grace added Park Ji-yeon to the top of her observation list and began watching very carefully. What she found over the next 2 weeks was a gift she had not asked for and would have preferred not to receive. Ji-yeon visited the building 4 more times. Director Choi, 39th floor each time. But on her 3rd visit Grace saw her in the 2nd floor corridor. No business on the 2nd floor, no connection to anyone on the 2nd floor, no stated purpose for being on the 2nd floor. Standing outside the telecommunications supply room looking at her phone with the specific focused stillness of someone receiving operational instructions rather than reading messages. Grace cleaned the far end of the corridor. Ji-yeon stayed 4 minutes. Then left. The supply room contained the secondary telecommunications infrastructure for floors 30 through 45. On her 4th visit Ji-yeon spent 40 minutes on the 39th floor, and then took the stairs to the 2nd floor instead of the elevator. Grace was already there. Grace had been there because she had anticipated this. She watched Ji-yeon spend 3 minutes outside the supply room. Then she wrote the longest report she had sent since signing the contract and submitted it at 11 p.m. on a Thursday. At 11:45 her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Miss Nwosu. His voice. She had heard it exactly 9 times since the morning in the lobby. She had, entirely against her professional judgment, memorized the specific quality of it. The controlled low register, the complete absence of anything superfluous, the way it occupied the exact amount of space required and not one molecule more. Yes, she said. Your report tonight. A pause. How certain are you? Certain enough to send it at 11 p.m., she said. A pause. The edge of something that would, in a different man in a different context, have been a laugh. I need you to do something tomorrow morning, he said. Before anyone else arrives. What? He told her. She listened. When he finished she said, that's not cleaning. No, he agreed. It isn't. She thought about it for 4 seconds. Fine, she said. Thank you, Grace. He used her name. The first time he had used her name on the phone. She sat in the dark of her Itaewon room after he ended the call and thought about the distance between who she had been when she arrived in Seoul and who she was apparently becoming. She set her alarm for 4 a.m. She went to sleep. What happened the following morning took 11 minutes. The device was exactly where he had told her it would be, behind the third panel in the telecommunications supply room, attached to the secondary hub with the careful neatness of someone who had done this before and expected it not to be found. She photographed it from 4 angles. She did not touch it. She cleaned the room with her usual thoroughness because the room needed cleaning, and because thoroughness was a form of dignity, she was not willing to abandon regardless of what else was happening. She sent the photographs to Ms. Cho at 6:22 a.m. Then she went back to work. At 9 a.m. the building was different. She felt it the way she always felt the building's shifts, not through any specific observable change but through the aggregate quality of how people moved and what the air did. The 42nd floor was unusually active. Unfamiliar men arrived and did not come back down. At 10:15 Director Choi was walked out of the building by 2 men who were polite in the way that foreclosed any alternative. At 11, Park Ji-yeon's car arrived at the entrance and was turned away without Ji-yeon stepping out. Grace cleaned the 3rd floor. She said nothing to anyone. She thought, this is what the building does. This is what I am part of. She was not afraid of it. She was not certain that the absence of fear was wisdom or something more complicated. He came to find her at 1 p.m. She was on her knees at the base of a 3rd-floor window, the position she had been in the second time he had ever seen her. She realized with a distant private amusement, when she heard the door. She looked up. He was alone. This was unusual. She had never seen him entirely alone in the building. There was always Ms. Cho or a guard or someone moving in his gravitational field. Alone in a doorway in his shirt sleeves with his jacket over one arm he looked. She filed this immediately and firmly, more human than his public version allowed. He came into the room. He sat on the edge of the conference table. Stunned, he said. I heard. You heard. Buildings talk, she said. When you know how to listen. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. You've been listening to this building for a long time. Since before you adjusted my hours. A pause. You knew I adjusted your hours. I suspected it by week 2. I confirmed it by week 4. She sat back on her heels. The server room man was the confirmation. The timing was too precise for coincidence. The recalibration. She saw it happen, the minor adjustment of his model of her, upward. Why didn't you say anything, he said. You hadn't asked me to. He was quiet. Then, most people in your position would have been frightened. By what this building is. By what I am. Grace looked at him. She had thought about this. Carefully, repeatedly, across many early mornings in her Itaewon room. I grew up in Enugu, she said. My father drove for a man whose name people spoke quietly. I have known what serious silence smells like since I was 8 years old. She paused. I know what this building is. I decided a long time ago that knowing what something is and being frightened of it are not the same thing. He held her gaze. No, he said quietly. They are not. The room was very still. Han Soo-Hyun, she said. He waited. My name is Grace. She said it simply. Not as a correction. As an offering. Not Miss Nwosu. Grace. My mother named me that because she believed I would be a princess. I think about that every morning. He held the name. The way you held something you intended to keep. Grace, he said. It sounded different in his voice. More real somehow. More permanently lodged in the world. She was not going to think about that. The contract, he said. I want to revise it. Revise it how? What you have been doing for the past 8 weeks has gone considerably beyond observing cleaning corridors. He looked at her directly. I want to compensate you appropriately for what you are actually doing. Which is intelligence work for a criminal organization, she said plainly. He did not flinch. Yes. And if I say no, your current contract continues unchanged. She believed him. She believed him because in 8 weeks she had developed a precise model of how he operated, and what that model consistently showed was a man who did not make offers he did not mean and did not issue threats where simple statements would do. I want a different structure, she said. Not a flat rate. A percentage arrangement. Each operation valued individually. Something crossed his face. The satisfaction of a calculation confirmed. Miss Cho will draw it up, he said. He stood. One more thing, she said. He waited. Whatever the new contract says. My brother's fees and my mother's medication transfer first. Every month. Without exception. He looked at her. Of course, he said. He left. She sat on the floor of the conference room and breathed. Then she stood up. She finished the window. If you are feeling this story right now, and I know you are, hit that like button. Right now. It is 2 seconds and it means the world to this channel. Subscribe if you are not already here. And drop a comment. Do you think Grace is falling for him, or is this purely professional? Because the comment section needs to weigh in on this right now. I read every single one. Now let's continue. Because what is coming next changes everything. The weeks accumulated. She moved through them with the same systematic attention she applied to everything, cataloging what was happening to her the way she cataloged anomalies in the building, noting and filing and trying to determine what category it belonged in. The problem was that it did not fit any clean category. Han Soo-Hyun was not what she had prepared for. She had prepared for cold. For the particular efficiency of a powerful man who had included her in his operation because she was useful and would discard her when she ceased to be. She had prepared for the kind of intelligence that expressed itself as control of information, of people, of outcomes. She had not prepared for someone who paid attention. Real attention. The kind that cost something. The coffee, precisely right, twice a week now, always placed on her desk when she arrived in the morning as though it had appeared rather than been deliberately placed. The evening 3 weeks after the takeout when she had mentioned in passing, not to him, to Ms. Cho in a conversation about travel documentation, that her visa renewal was in 2 weeks and the process was complicated and she was worried about the timeline. 2 days later, Ms. Cho had placed a folder on her desk. Inside it, her visa renewal application, completed and filed by a law firm she had never heard of, with a processing note that indicated it had been flagged for expedited review. She had looked at the folder for a long time. She had not said anything to him about it. The following morning she arrived at 6 a.m. to find a coffee on her desk with 1 sugar. And she sat down and drank it and thought about the specific language of a man who expressed things through action that he had not learned to express through words. She was in very serious trouble. She had accepted this. She was managing it with the same precision she managed everything else. The problem arrived on a Friday. She was in the security monitoring room reviewing footage from the previous 48 hours when she found herself on camera. On the 42nd floor. At 8:43 a.m. on Thursday. She read the timestamp 3 times. She had not been on the 42nd floor on Thursday. She had never been on the 42nd floor. She was not authorized for the 42nd floor and she had never, in the 16 weeks since this all began, attempted to change that. She rewound the footage. Watched it again. The woman wore her uniform. Had her build. Had braids pulled back the way Grace pulled them back for work. Moved with what could, at a glance, be read as her particular way of moving through a space. But the angle of the shoulders was wrong. The height was slightly off. And the hands, she had spent 16 weeks learning to read hands and she knew her own, were different. Someone had been in this building impersonating her. On the 42nd floor. She did not panic. She saved the footage to a secure drive with the methodical efficiency that had become second nature. She documented the timestamp, the location, the duration. 4 minutes and 17 seconds. She cross-referenced with the entry logs to establish how the woman had entered the building and identified an 8-minute gap in the camera coverage on the second-floor service entrance at 8:31 a.m. Then she went to find Han Soo-Hyun. She had never been to the 42nd floor. The elevator required a keycard she did not have. She took it anyway and held her building access card to the reader and the elevator went up, which told her that someone had adjusted her access permissions without telling her, which told her something about the nature of the preparation that had been made around her. She knocked on the glass door of the main boardroom. Han Soo-Hyun looked up from a meeting with 4 men she did not recognize. He looked at her face. He stood immediately. "I want you to hold that." He looked at her face. And he stood. Not at his phone. Not at his watch. At her face. And he stood. Remember that detail. He stepped out. She showed him the footage on her phone. He watched it twice without speaking. Then took her phone and walked back into the boardroom and showed the 4 men. The meeting ended in 30 seconds. The 4 men left in 4 different directions with the coordinated urgency of deployment. Han Soo-Hyun turned to her. How long ago? 40 minutes. You documented everything before you came to me. Of course. He looked at her for one moment, the full assessment quick and complete. Come upstairs, he said. His office was large and spare and contained almost nothing personal. She had expected this. She had built a model of him over 16 weeks, and one of its consistent features was the absence of the kind of personal artifacts that most people use to populate their spaces. No photographs. No objects with sentimental meaning. Nothing that announced who he was outside of this building. What the office contained was precision. A desk with 3 screens. A single window that faced the city like a judgment. Bookshelves with books arranged by something other than aesthetics. Some organizational system she could not immediately identify that she suspected was chronological or operational rather than decorative. The view from the window was sole from high enough that it looked manageable. Organized. A city you could understand from this altitude. She stood in front of his desk while he pulled up the security feeds on his main screen. Someone has been building a file on this operation, he said. Without preparation. Without the softening that this information probably warranted. For approximately 6 weeks. The footage of you on the 42nd floor is the most recent piece. She absorbed this. Using me, she said. My appearance. My presence in the building. She heard the precision of it as she said it. Building a case that I am the source. Yes. She looked at him. You knew, she said. I suspected. For 6 weeks. I considered it a possibility. And you didn't tell me. A pause. No. This. Right here. This is the moment. I need you to feel what Grace is feeling right now. Not just the betrayal of information withheld. The specific betrayal of being used as a piece in a game she did not know she was inside. By someone she had begun, carefully, against her better judgment, with full awareness of the risk, to trust. Grace looked at him. At the controlled face. At the dark eyes that met hers without flinching. At the man who had said she is not your concern across a lobby and changed the direction of everything and had apparently been shaping her path in ways she had not fully known. Why, she said. Because telling you would have changed how you moved through the building, he said. Changed what they observed of you. Changed what I could learn from watching what they tried to do. You used me as bait. The words landed between them. He held them. Yes, he said. Just that. No qualifier. No strategy wrapped around it. She breathed. Without telling me. Yes. The office was very quiet. The soul she could see through the window moved through its morning entirely unaware. She assembled what she was feeling with the same precision she assembled everything else. The betrayal was real and she was not going to minimize it. The anger was real and she was not going to pretend otherwise. And underneath both of those things, underneath the professional violation and the personal cost of being positioned without her knowledge, something else that she was not going to name in his office but that was also real. The fact that he was still here. That he had not hidden from the accounting. That he had said yes when she said you used me as bait without a single syllable of justification. The person building the file, she said. Do you know who it is? He looked at her for a moment. Then he turned his screen toward her. She looked at the photograph. A Korean man. Slightly younger than Han Soo-Hyun. Similar features, the structural resemblance undeniable. Standing outside the building in what appeared to be surveillance footage. Looking up at the building with an expression she recognized. The expression of someone who believed something in the building was theirs. She looked up at Han Soo-Hyun. That is your brother, she said. The longest silence she had ever sat inside. Yes, Han Soo-Hyun said. Drop a like on this video right now because this story is not going where you thought it was going and we are only halfway through. Subscribe if you have not already. And comment below. Did you see the brother coming? Because I need to know. Drop your answer right now and let's keep going. His brother's name was Han Soo-Jin. 2 years younger. Same father, different mothers. A fact Han Soo-Hyun delivered with the flat evenness of something that had been awound for a long time, and had calcified into something that no longer bled but had changed the shape of the bone. Same father. Different mothers. I need you to understand what that means in the context of the world this man was raised in. It did not mean half-brother in the gentle sense. It meant competitor. It meant the specific dynamic of 2 men raised in the same power structure, pointed at the same inheritance, by a father who apparently saw no reason to resolve the ambiguity of what that meant. Grace understood this immediately. She had grown up with enough of her own family's complicated geography to recognize a wound that had been administered before either person was old enough to have deserved it. Soo-Hyun had been with the organization for 8 years. Had risen through it legitimately. Had been, until 6 weeks ago when the first anomaly appeared in the building's security logs, inside the circle of complete trust. What changed 6 weeks ago, Grace said. My father's will, Han Soo-Hyun said. He looked out the window when he said it. He died 14 months ago. The will contained a condition. The organization passes in full to whichever of his sons can demonstrate operational control of the Seoul network by the 18th month anniversary of his death. He paused. For months from now. Grace let this land completely. And building a file that positions me as the source of the intelligence leaks, she said. That does what exactly? Creates grounds to remove me, he said. A leader who allowed a civilian cleaning worker to access the organization's intelligence infrastructure, failed to identify her as a liability for 16 weeks, enabled a 6-week security breach, he stopped. It would be sufficient grounds for the council to transfer operational control. To him. Yes. She was quiet. She thought about the lobby. About 4 words. About the adjusted hours and the coffee and the takeout from the Nigerian restaurant and the visa renewal and every small deliberate thing this man had done over 16 weeks that she had been carefully not calling what it was. She thought about how none of that, none of the care, none of the precision, none of the specific attention, had prevented him from placing her inside a risk she had not consented to. You should have told me, she said. Yes, he said. Just that. No defense. No strategy. Just the clean, honest weight of it. She breathed. I would have helped you from the beginning, she said. Not because of the contract. Because she stopped. She looked at him. At the window and the city and the profile of a man who was not going to turn around until she was finished. Because the right thing to do was obvious and you should have trusted me to choose it. He turned. His face was. She had seen every version of his face over 16 weeks and this one was new. Not the dispassionate professional attention. Not the controlled assessment. Not the brief unguarded opening she had catalogued twice before. This was a man without a layer to retreat to. I know, he said quietly. I know I should have. The room held that. Both of them inside it. Tell me where the file is, she said. She found it on a Tuesday morning at 6:15. The 37th floor supply room. Her supply room. Behind a false panel she had not known existed in a space she had cleaned approximately 60 times. A hard drive. A sealed envelope. 3 printed documents. She stood in the supply room for 1 second. She was standing in the place where her own reputation, her safety, her visa, her access to everything that had made Chukwemeka's school fees and her mother's medication possible, had been quietly and precisely dismantled. She thought about her mother saying, Grace, you were named a princess for a reason. She photographed everything from 4 angles. She left it exactly as she had found it. She sent the photographs to Ms. Cho at 6:22 a.m. Then she went back to work. She cleaned the rest of the 37th floor with the same thoroughness she always brought to it. Every surface. Every corner. Every base of every window. Because thoroughness was a form of dignity. And she was not going to let anyone, not Soo-Hyun, not the file, not the false panel in her supply room, take her dignity from her in her own workspace. He found her at 7 a.m. Not on the 42nd floor. Not in her office. In the lobby. She was cleaning the glass panels. The same glass panels she had been cleaning the morning everything began. First pass, then second pass. The ritual she had performed hundreds of times in this building in this uniform with this cloth. Han Soo-Hyun came through the private entrance with 2 of his senior security people and crossed the lobby toward the elevator bank, and as he passed her, 2 meters to her right, not breaking stride, not turning his head, moving with the specific economy of a man whose morning had already been determined, he said, quietly enough that only she could hear it, Thank you, Grace. She pressed her cloth to the glass. She kept cleaning. The elevator doors closed behind him. She stood at the glass and looked at Seoul reflected in it, the street, the cars, the cherry trees that were now fully in bloom, the city going about itself with complete indifference, and felt something move through her that was large and complicated and entirely hers. She finished the second pass. She put her cloth away. She went upstairs. The 4 days that followed were the most intense the building had seen in the time she had been in it. She worked. She observed. She documented. She submitted reports with the same systematic precision she had always brought to this building, only now from a position of understanding the architecture of what she was inside rather than guessing at it. On the second day she learned that Director Choi had been removed from the building permanently. On the third day she learned, through the quality of the atmosphere on the 42nd floor, which she could now read with approximately 70% accuracy, that something significant had been presented to the council. On the fourth day she learned, through Ms. Cho, who told her in the precise minimal language she used for significant information, that Soo-Jin's position within the organization had been dissolved. Dissolved, Grace said. He is alive, Ms. Cho said. Which told her the question had been asked. And outside Seoul. That is the resolution. She sat with this. She thought about the photograph of a man looking up at a building like it was something owed to him. She thought about a father who had structured his inheritance as a competition between two sons and apparently not considered, or not cared, what that competition would cost both of them. She thought about Han Soo-Hyun saying same father, different mothers with the flat evenness of something that had stopped bleeding years ago but had changed the shape of the bone. Is he all right, she said. Ms. Cho looked at her. He is managing it, Ms. Cho said carefully. He manages things. Grace nodded. She went back to work. On the fifth day Ms. Cho appeared in her office with a revised contract. Grace read it. Then read it again. The number on it was, she sat with it, life-changing. Not in the abstract sense that people used when they meant significant. In the specific concrete sense of Chukwamika finishing secondary school and starting university. Of her mother's medication for the next several years. Of the room in Itaewon being replaced by something with a window that looked at something other than the building next door. Of staying in Seoul longer than she had planned to stay anywhere. Is this because of the file, she said. It is because of 16 weeks of work that exceeded the original scope by a significant margin, Ms. Cho said. And because Mr. Han would like you to continue. Continue as what? Ms. Cho paused. He would like to discuss that with you directly. When you are ready. She looked at her. He was specific about that phrase. Grace looked at the contract. She thought about when you are ready from a man who managed everything. Who controlled outcomes. Who had placed her inside a risk without her knowledge and then stood in his office and said yes you are right without flinching. She thought about what ready meant. She thought about what she was ready for and what she was not. Tell him Thursday, she said. Ms. Cho nodded. Then at the door Miss Nwosu. Grace looked up. Ms. Cho held her gaze for a moment with an expression that was, for the first time she could recall, entirely unguarded. He does not do any of this lightly, she said. I want you to know that. She left. Grace sat in her office. She looked at Seoul through the window for a long time. She thought about the specific weight of being known by someone who did not know how to say it out loud. She thought about whether that was enough. She decided she would decide on Thursday. Thursday arrived. She went to his office at 10 a.m. He was at his desk. Jacket on, the public version, the version that said this matters and I am presenting it properly. He gestured to the chair across from him and she sat in it, and they looked at each other across the surface of everything that had accumulated between them. The council met, he said. I know. The outcome was complete. A pause. Soo-Jin is gone. The file is destroyed. The access Ji-yeon had is closed. He held her gaze. It is done. She nodded. The role I want to discuss, he said. It is formal. It has authority. It has visibility inside the organization and it has, he paused, significant risk. I already have significant risk. More than you currently have. She looked at him. Why me, she said. It was the question that had been underneath everything for 16 weeks. He held it. Because you are the most precise person I have encountered in 20 years of building something that requires precision, he said. Because you see what is actually there rather than what people want you to see. Because you walk into a room and understand it before anyone in it understands you. He paused. And because I trust you. Which is not something I say without understanding exactly what it costs. The office was very quiet. She had prepared for many versions of this conversation. She had not prepared for that. Han Soo-Hyun, she said. Yes. If I say yes to this, she assembled it carefully. I need you to understand something. I will not be managed. I will not be given partial information to protect me. I will not be used as a piece in something I don't know I'm inside. She looked at him directly. If I am in something, I am fully in it. That is the only version I know how to be. He held her gaze. Yes, he said. Not immediately. With weight. Say it like it cost you something, she said. Something moved through his face. It costs me something, he said quietly. The way I operate, containing information, managing outcomes, it is not strategy with you. It is habit. A habit that caused damage. That I do not want to cause again. He paused. I am telling you that clearly because you asked me to, and because you deserve the clear version. She breathed. "'Kay," she said. "Okay. I want a week before I give you an answer." "Of course." She stood. She was at the door when he said, "Grace." She turned. He was still at his desk, looking at her with the expression she had never been able to fully categorize. Not the professional attention, not the brief unguarded opening, but the specific version of both simultaneously. The version that had no professional name. "The morning in the lobby," he said. "When I said she is not your concern." A pause. The pause of a man deciding whether to say the next thing. "That was not the first time I had noticed you." The room held that. "I know," she said. She left. She walked down from the 42nd floor in the elevator, watching Seoul rise around the glass, and thought about a name that meant princess and the distance between what she had been named and what she was becoming, and whether those two things were finally, after a very long journey through very difficult terrain, beginning to find each other. The week passed. She spent it the way she spent everything important, thinking with precision, listing what she knew and what she did not, what she wanted and what frightened her about wanting it. She called Chukwemeka on Wednesday. Not about any of this. About his school. About the girl he had mentioned 3 times now, in the careful way of someone who was not ready to admit he had mentioned her 3 times. "She sounds interesting," Grace said. "She is just someone from my class," Chukwemeka said. "You have mentioned her 3 times. Silence. "How is Korea?" he said. She laughed. The sound of her own laugh in the Itaewon room at 9 p.m. with her brother's voice through the phone and Seoul outside the window was. She held it. Let it be what it was. "Korea is complicated," she said. "Good complicated or bad complicated." She thought about cedar and cold. About coffee with 1 sugar. About the takeout from the Nigerian restaurant and her mother's jollof rice, and a man who remembered exactly what she had said in passing 3 weeks earlier. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "I'll tell you when I do." She called her mother on Thursday. Her mother asked when she was coming home. "Soon," she said. "That is what you said last time." "I know, Mama." Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then Grace. "Yes. You were named a princess," her mother said. "Not because I thought the world would treat you like one. Because I wanted you to remember that you already were one regardless of what the world thought." A pause. "Whatever is happening there, remember that." Grace sat in her room for a long time after the call ended. She thought about her mother, who had known something was different in her voice without asking what. She thought about the specific intelligence of people who loved you precisely. On Saturday she walked through Seoul. She had been in this city for 18 months and had spent most of that time with her head down, moving along the narrow corridor of survival, efficient and purposeful and fundamentally elsewhere in her head even when she was physically present. She walked on Saturday with her head up. She walked through Itaewon and into Yongsan and up through the hills toward Namsan, where the city spread below her in every direction and the Han River was a silver thread through it, and the cherry blossoms were past their peak now and the petals were coming down in the specific slow drift that was almost too beautiful to be real. She stood on the hill and looked at Seoul. She thought, this could be mine. Not in the sense of ownership. In the sense of chosen. In the sense of a place you have decided to be in rather than a place you ended up in by necessity. She had come to Seoul out of necessity. She had stayed out of something else. She was ready to call that something else by its name. Sunday morning at 9 a.m. she texted Ms. Cho. "Tell him yes." She put her phone down. She made tea. She stood at her window and watched Itaewon wake up below her and felt, for the first time since her mother had held her at the airport in Enugu and said you were named a princess for a reason, that the name and the life were finally the same size. Her phone buzzed. Ms. Cho understood. He would like to meet Monday morning. 9 a.m. His office. 30 seconds later, a second message from the same number that was not in Ms. Cho's voice at all. Thank you. 2 words. She held her phone and looked at them. 2 words from a man for whom words were allocated with complete precision and never spent without intention. She knew what they cost him. She knew what they meant. She was about to put her phone down when it buzzed again. Unknown number. She stared at it. Not the building's exchange. Not Ms. Cho. Not anyone in her contacts. She answered. Silence for 2 seconds. Then a man's voice. Korean. The specific careful quality of someone who had rehearsed what they were going to say, and was still afraid of saying it. Miss Nwosu. Yes. You don't know me. A pause. But I know you. I know what you found in that supply room. I know what it cost my brother. His voice was precise and controlled, and underneath it, she had spent 16 weeks learning to read the register of men who had been trained to contain things. She heard grief. Real grief. Not performed. The kind that had nowhere to go. And I know that whatever he has told you about why he protected you in that lobby 16 weeks ago, he has not told you everything. Her hand tightened on the phone. Who is this? She said. I think you know who this is, the voice said. She did. She stood very still in her Itaewon room with the Sunday morning light coming through the window and Seoul waking up below her, and the tea going cold in her other hand, and she thought about all the things she had assembled over 16 weeks into something she believed she understood. What hasn't he told me? She said. The man breathed slowly. Your father, he said. Start there. The line went quiet. Grace stood at her window. Below her the city moved through its Sunday morning, entirely unaware that in a room on the 3rd floor of a building in Itaewon, a woman named after a princess had just discovered that the story she thought she was living had a deeper story underneath it, that someone had known about since before she walked into a building in Gangnam and began to clean its floors. Since before the lobby. Since before the adjusted hours. Since before any of it. Her father. She had not spoken to her father in 11 years. She had not spoken to her father because 11 years ago her father had disappeared from Enugu on a Tuesday morning, and had not come back, and her mother had packed everything connected to him into a single box that she kept in the back of the wardrobe and never opened, and had said only once, quietly, on the evening of the day she understood he was not returning. Some men belong to worlds that are not ours to follow them into. Grace. Remember that. She had remembered it. She had carried it here. She had walked into a building in Gangnam with it. And somewhere in this building, in the 42 floors of glass and marble and serious silence, and a man who said she is not your concern, like a fact rather than a decision. Her father's world and her world had intersected in a way she had not known to see. Until now. Tell me, she said. The man on the other end of the line, Han Soo-Hyun, the brother, the exile, the man whose grief she had just heard, began to speak. And the story she thought she was living opened underneath her like a floor she had been standing on that had always been a door. And that is where we leave Grace. Standing at a window in Itaewon on a Sunday morning with a cold cup of tea and a phone pressed to her ear, and the floor of everything she thought she knew opening into something she was not remotely prepared for. She said yes on a Sunday morning. And by Sunday evening the question was no longer whether she trusted Han Soo-Hyun. The question was whether he had known about her father the entire time. And if he had, what does that make the lobby? What does that make the coffee? What does that make all of it? Part 2 is coming. And the answer to that question is going to rewrite every single scene in this story from the very beginning. Subscribe right now. Hit that bell. Like this video if this story took you somewhere real today. Share it with someone who needs a story that does not let go. And drop a comment below. Do you think Han Soo-Hyun knew about her father from the beginning? Yes or no? Because I promise you the answer is not what you expect. I will see you in part 2.